don't say the same hate that they said 30 years ago, but they're doing the same things. So by passing this definition, we give law enforcement in enforcing hate crimes the tools to be able to make the determination themselves. And I'm proud to say that less than a year after we passed it in Bal Harbour, the state of Florida is set to vote on what would essentially make the Bal Harbour Ordinance state law in another week or two. So we're on our way, and it's going across the country.
Okay. Did you want to comment? Did you want to comment on the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act?
I would also highlight the importance of establishing a definition. I would echo the idea of elevating the special envoy position too. The Anti-Semitism Awareness Act is one that we really need to educate more members of, to get more co-sponsors of. I think the first bill, H.R. 336, which is the companion to S1 that we discussed earlier, I think is the one that may move first. But in the meantime, there are other bills that are important as well, and I think one thing that isn't established in S1 that we really need to get at is the idea of adopting a definition, because some people don't even know how to define anti-Semitism. And what I think is also important about you all being here, and when you go back to your college campuses to tell your story, is that a lot of people don't know what anti-Semitism looks like, they don't know what it sounds like, they don't know what it feels like, and we need to share that story, because others who haven't experienced it don't understand it, and they may not be motivated to do anything about it, and quite frankly, they might be flinging their own anti-Semitic trope without even realizing it. So your motivation, your inspiration, not just to be here for this, but to go back and tell your stories. And I think that really is the heart of the motivation why we had the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act first drafted. But to help it, it's not just educating more members of Congress, but also educating more members of our country as to what anti-Semitism looks like and feels like and sounds like.
Thank you, thank you. And for those of you who want a little bit more about it, just Google U.S. State Department definition of anti-Semitism. It's on the website, so you can see what we're talking about. It's a clear definition that we are that Florida, South Carolina, other places have are codifying into law, and this is being presented to as a federal law as well. So, the UN Human Rights Council, if ever there's an oxymoron, is compiling a list of companies which operate beyond the green line. You can call that a blacklist of companies doing business with Israel, because there is no real green line, and it's impossible to economically divide Israel like that. But this list can impact Israeli and U.S. companies who have been sent letters by the UN Human Rights Council to say, what kind of business are you doing in Israel? And how can we protect our taxpayers? How can we protect ourselves from becoming de facto participants in this kind of discrimination against Israel? I'm going to throw that to you, because Gabe, you've been working on this.
So before figuring out how we can fight the UN Human Rights Council, which there are ways to do it, and I'll answer. First thing we have to do is strengthen the Jewish community. Right? Everybody that leaves this conference has to go back knowing that this is the best time in history to be a Jew. The state of Israel has never been stronger than it is before. We have to be proud of who you are and your state. We have to be thankful to the United States for being the most hospitable country in the history of the world to the Jewish people. And then we get to deal with issues like this. First, I want to say that we have our blacklist of our own. There's 11 states in the country who have divestment sections of their anti-BDS laws. Today, the state of Texas decided to list Airbnb and divest from them before their decisions. There are city efforts, there are state efforts that have to be done. But then the question is, for the audience that's here, you guys are college students and high school students, what can you do? And what you can do is make sure you go visit Israel often. Make sure that you go visit all of the land of Israel and you see that there is no such thing as a green line. You visit Jews wherever they live, and you don't support what I consider racist policies of saying that in some areas in the world Jews can live or can't live, because Jews in this day and age should be able to live in every inch of this world.
That's right. I know that you are working on this in Florida, Bel Harbor. I think you're mobilizing some other mayors to go along with you. You want to talk about that?
Sure. I just came back on Friday from a place called Tel Aviv, Israel. And I was there to launch a global coalition of mayors against hatred, anti-Semitism, and BDS. And we did it along with, look, there's a lot of enemies of Israel, but there's also a lot of friends. And I did it along with a very strong friend of Israel, a friend of mine, Mayor Hugh Becker from Frankfurt, Germany, who stands up for Israel and the Jewish people. So me, Mayor Becker, and Mayor Bibas from Modin, Israel, the three of us together in front of over 500 mayors from around the country, around the world, launched this coalition. And together, the UN Human Rights Council is going to have to deal with us.
Good. Is there anything you wanted to comment about the UN Human Rights Council?
Well, they just came out with a report that if someone was to read this report and try to get educated and not be familiar with these issues like you are, they may think that this is a neutral, third-party, unbiased report on what the reality is going on between Israel and the Palestinians, what's going on at Gaza and the West Bank and Hamas. What is missing from that report is Hamas using humans as shields and paying individuals for getting themselves shot. And the human rights violations that that Hamas is responsible for in Gaza, subjecting their own people to, with regards to education and lack of infrastructure, but as I mentioned before, using their own civilians as human shields. The UNHCR is not recognizing, HRC is not recognizing the inherent right of self-defense for Israelis. When Palestinian terrorists murder innocent Israelis, there's nothing to be neutral about. We need to call it as it is. And U.S. tax dollars should not be going to the Palestinians to be financially rewarding terrorism and inciting violence. So as the Human Rights Council issues reports like we saw this week, we should have bipartisan condemnation of what is missing from that report. And as we saw, Elliot Engel right away came out with a statement, and Ted Deutsch right away came out with a statement. Whether you are a Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal, this is how we should be bipartisan in our support of Israel, is that we all should be standing shoulder to shoulder with our nation's greatest ally and calling it out when a report like that gets issued publicly.
Thank you. So we're kind of going from federal back to municipal and state. You know, there are state anti-BDS laws and there are federal laws we're working on. And even in municipalities, there are ways to protect people from discriminating against Israel. Are there any other kinds of actions that states and municipalities can take to defend against anti-Semitism, to defend against Israel discrimination?
Yeah, so the answer is yes, and I was glad to see our Governor Jerry Brown sign on with 50 governors from around the country in opposition to BDS as it would apply to the states. But locally, we've seen a variety of ways that we can respond. When a swastika goes up on a house of worship, the locality needs the engagement of the police force in that regard, and we need to have a robust response there. But we also have to have a zero tolerance policy when anti-Semitism hits our streets and our campuses locally. What do I mean by that? Recently, it was discovered in Los Angeles that there's a mural on the side of a building in East LA with a specter with the Jewish stars haunting over people and children. And I'm told that the owner of that building said, let's have a dialogue. Let's talk about what this means and what it means to me. And I was proud of my friend, Councilman Paul Koretz, who said, no, there's no dialogue on this issue. This is not okay. And that carried over just a few months back when Councilman Koretz and I were on the campus of UCLA protesting the conference that SJP was hosting I was proud of the city council in that regard in passing a resolution opposing that conference, and we did more. We went back to my alma mater and said, this is not happening here, and if it is going to happen against the best wishes of the community and against some legal advice, at least we can express our displeasure and say you're not welcome here to embrace hatred.
Very good. Yeah.
So there's a lot that can be done, that is being done at the municipal level, state levels, and federal levels. It's interesting. But what really needs to be done is that the Jewish community and the pro-Jewish, pro-Israel community is a small community. That's the truth. None of you should go home thinking, wow, these guys have it covered. We're good. What we need is leadership. We need leadership from every single person sitting here today, in your schools, in your circles of your friends, in the groups that you're in. We need leadership from everybody when it comes to the state of Israel and to the Jewish people and fighting anti-Semitism. And from the municipal leaders and elected officials, we need leadership not just in passing laws, but when events like that happen, the community needs leadership. They need to hear a clear moral voice that says this is unacceptable in our community and it's not happening here.
Thank you. Brad Schneider has been listening to this and has a comment. So, Roy, can you give Brad an opportunity to weigh in?
Great, thank you. I just wanted to echo some of the things that have been said, but especially that last comment that we are a small community, but we are not a community without a voice, and we're not a community without the argument to win. So I know many of the people in the room are students. Everyone's supportive of these students who are at the front lines. We just need to make sure that you guys have the confidence and understanding that we have your back. On behalf of Congressman Zeldin and I know Brad Sherman's got somebody there. We talked about this in Congress. I was proud last Congress we introduced the combating BDS legislation. I was one of the people with Brad Sherman to be an original co-sponsor. The defining anti-Semitism, that's all part and parcel of it. But the key piece is having the confidence in your day-to-day conversations as you're talking to people on campus, at work, wherever you are, and just making sure they understand that supporting Israel is not something we do. Had recent conversations about loyalties. We support Israel because Israel is our best ally in the world, as Congressman Zeldin has said. And it is a mutual strategic relationship. We share values, we share interests, we share threats, but the work we do together is what's going to ensure that we share this common bond into the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We mentioned at the beginning about the Strengthening America's Security Act. There's a lot of buzz when these pieces of legislation go out. They said, oh, they inhibit free speech. These laws go against the First Amendment. They're telling people what they can think and say. Is that what they do?
Absolutely not. This effort of the Combating BDS Act, S1, the companion legislation in the House, absolutely does not impede free speech. It is giving states and local governments the ability to end contracts with businesses that are boycotting Israel. That though, if you are an individual and you are out there, you want to speak out your mind against Israel, if you want to be pro-Palestinian, if you want to go beyond legitimate, reasonable criticism of the Israeli government and start crossing all other lines, this legislation doesn't say that you can't do that. Now, you shouldn't. I'm just a member of Congress with a personal opinion who believes that you should not be doing that. But I really believe that the reason why people are opposing this anti-BDS legislation in the name of it impacting free speech is that they want to mask their real intentions of opposing the legislation, which is that they harbor anti-Israel feelings either themselves and or amongst people who support them. And that's why I really think that we need to confront this head on right now. We can't empower it, we can't elevate it, we have to crush it. And let's have an honest debate with each other about BDS. If BDS and support of it was about legitimate, reasonable criticism of any government, we wouldn't have any problem with it. Here in our country, it's an American value. You can be critical of our own government. You can be critical of Israel or any foreign government. The problem is, in the name of BDS, what is happening to innocent people. It is about harming the Israeli economy today. It is about spreading anti-Semitism at the United Nations. It is about, in some cases, with UN Security Council Resolution 2334 that passed in December of 2017, it's seeking to define an illegal occupation and to ethnically cleanse Judea and Samaria and East Jerusalem of Jews. Depending on how honest we want to be with each other in a debate with certain things that are said and certain policies that are enacted. Bringing it back home to this one particular issue with regards to combating BDS Act, I don't believe that the opposition to it, so much of it is truly about protecting free speech. I really think that that is an excuse to mask their real desires and intentions, which is support for the BDS movement and harboring positions that quite candidly are just anti-Israeli positions, and in many cases, beyond anti-Semitic thoughts, it's been manifested with actual anti-Semitic acts.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a room here of student leaders, and this is the next generation of leaders we're looking at here. What would you give them advice about entering the political arena?
I don't know if I'm the youngest on the panel, but I'm going to guess that I may be, so I'll take it first. Look, I think that the one piece of advice I'll give you, whether it's in the political arena or just in leadership, is be strong and proud Jews. You know, take everybody in college campuses now is talking about where everyone comes from, indigenous rights, and protecting the rights of others. But we should always protect the rights of others, absolutely. But we can never forget who we are and our own history, our 3,700 years of history of our people and our history. And that you should take that with you in every road that you walk. So if your inclination is to go into politics, only do it if you're going to be true to yourself. Don't do it just for the spotlight. That's a waste of time.
Yeah, I would say two things. One, I used to teach high school civics, and so I would tell students the same thing I taught my students in my classroom all those years ago, which was the barriers to entry to getting involved are lower than you think. People want volunteers. People want compatriots out in the field standing up. You can just show up. You don't have to sign a contract. You don't have to wonder whether you'll be accepted. Show up and you can start making a difference right away. The other thing I'll say is this. Right before this event, I came from a chapter of the Jewish war veterans, and I can say to you students, let's take a lesson from our own history. Back in that day, those Jewish war veterans were subject to more anti-Semitism than maybe many of you have ever faced in your lives, and yet they stood up for their country, and they served with dignity and honor, and they represented the Jewish people well, and proved the case that Jews can be loyal to the United States, and they are loyal to the United States. And when we represent positions that support Israel, it's because that's a wise policy to take for the United States. And so let's learn from our own past and stand up for our values in every way possible.
Thank you.
There are college campuses all across the entire country where faculty, administration, students are getting officially, as a position of a student body or a position of a campus, anti-Israel positions, pro-BDS positions. We see it in student newspapers where editorial content would end up intimidating. What people are attempting to speak for you on your college campuses, don't let them speak for you as they promote their certain ill feelings that really they're wrong even speaking on behalf of themselves. They're especially wrong in attempting to speak on your behalf. If you see something with a professor doing something wrong, and you go to administration, and the best that they can offer you is to just transfer to another class, don't let them just get away with that. You have to actually confront it and hold those administrators accountable. When you have anti-Semitism manifesting itself in any form on your campus, Don't let the PR department of your college campus just keep that internally where no one finds out about it. Run for positions, get active in your student newspaper, get active in local campaigns, and where you see in your local campaigns, whether it's at home or at these college campuses, that someone wants to run for office and they're an anti-Semite, make sure that you're doing everything in your power to ensure that they're not getting elected, and get involved in the campaign where someone has the values that you share. As far as running for office, it's actually pretty easy. You want to run for Congress? You can go online to fec.gov. You could download a form. It takes you 5 minutes, and then you're a candidate for Congress. Now, some of you, this is a few years down the road, and we're not going to get into that end of things, obviously, here in a forum like this. The point is to be involved and don't be intimidated by getting involved at any level in order to push back, and don't let anyone speak for you with their own hate that's filling their heart.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to today's leaders, and thank you to tomorrow's leaders.